All right, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for tuning into today's installment of Tuesday Timely Topics at noon, brought to you by the Link Center here at UWS. This is the second event within this series, and we will be hosting two more during April, so be sure to check those out. My name is Amber Heidenreich, and I am a community and voter engagement intern with the Link Center, and I will be co-hosting this podcast-style discussion today with Emily Groves. Emily?
Awesome. Thanks, Amber. Hey, y'all. I'm Emily Groves. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the community engagement coordinator at the Link Center. And I'm super excited for today's topic, which is maintaining health and balance, reflections from this last year and promising practices for now and the future. So our purpose for today's discussion is to normalize the struggle of the pandemic life while providing some coping strategies for all of us to use. Today's structure, like Amber said, is a podcast style event. So Amber and we're going to be tag teaming questions to our distinguished guests, Randy and Kenna. But other guests, please feel free to use the chat feature to drop comments and questions. We'll try our best to address those during our time together. Also, just to note, we are recording today's event, so feel free to message us questions privately if you would like to. So feel free to direct message Amber or myself. So without further ado, Amber, feel free to take it away to introduce our guests.
Thanks, Emily. So with us today is Dr. Kenna Bolton-Holz, and she is a clinical psychologist who has been teaching in the psychology program here at UWS for 11 years. Prior to coming to UWS, she primarily worked with individuals experiencing serious mental illness and their families in inpatient, outpatient, and partial inpatient settings. Her research focuses are on feminist psychology. And we also have Mr. Randy Barker. He has a master's in education and is a licensed professional counselor. And he is also the director for health and counseling services and the Pruitt Center for Mindfulness and Wellbeing at UWS. Randy has previously worked as a college counselor, taught college courses on positive psychology and emotional intelligence, and has provided a vast array of training and workshops surrounding the diverse areas of mindfulness and well-being.
Woo, sounds like health and balance gurus to me. I'm so excited to have both of you here. Thank you so much for your time. Randy, from my understanding, you have prepared a short mindfulness exercise for us to do. I'd love for you to be able to kick us off in that.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all for being here. So yeah, we'll just kind of take this time to kind of bring ourselves to the present moment, ground ourselves in. So if you would, you can just kind of make yourself comfortable if you would. And if you want, you can close your eyes to do this exercise, but you don't necessarily need to do that. If you don't feel comfortable closing your eyes, I would suggest just finding a soft gaze in front of you. And you can just kind of find that dignified stance of feeling comfortable, but not too comfortable, and being alert, but not too alert. Just finding what is right for you. And just start by giving yourself a pat on the back and for being here at this present moment, right? This precious moment. So mindfulness is really about being in the present moment, mind and body, right? Being aware of what's taking place in our mind and our bodies, in the world around us in this present moment. So you can just start by bringing your awareness to your breath. I always like to start with our breath, right? Just bring your awareness to your breath and just notice your breath. Just notice breathing in and breathing out. And just bring your awareness to, as you breathe in, making sure that that breath goes down into your chest and filling up your stomach. You hold it for a second or two and eventually letting it all the way out. And just slowly but surely finding what rhythm is right for you. No needing to manipulate the breath in any way, just allowing it to flow. Just flowing in and out. And if the mind has wandered, well, welcome to the club, right? That's what our mind loves to do, is to go to the future, to go to the past, right? And anytime that you find that it's wandered, just bring it back to the present moment. And one of the easiest ways of doing that is with your breath. I like to say that our breath is our speed dial that connects the body and the mind and the mind and the body. You never leave home without it. It's always accessible to bring you back over and over again. Now just bring your awareness to the temperature of your breath as you breathe in. And perhaps notice the change in the temperature as you breathe out. Just again, that present moment awareness, curiosity. And again, if the mind has wandered, again, just bringing it, being aware of it and bringing it back over and over again with just kind of that attitude of kindness and curiosity. And for other people, a nice way of grounding in or bringing themselves to the present moment is just kind of tuning into their body. I think it's so true in life that at many times we're not even aware of our body. Our body is this incredible, precious vehicle. We need to just be aware of it and to give it what it needs at times. But just scan your body, if you would, from the top of your head to the tips of your toes, from the tips of your toes to the top of your head. And just notice. Notice any feelings or sensations, or perhaps nothing at all. Just really tune into that. Be open, curious to what you're experiencing at this moment in time. And again, if the mind has wandered, that's all right. Just bring it back to your body, bring it back to your breath, whatever works best for you. And just give yourself permission to take a nice few deep, more cleansing, relaxing, energizing breaths, whatever it is that your body and mind needs. And as you exhale, letting go of whatever your body and mind doesn't need. 2 more, breathing in, breathing out, and breathing in, and breathing out. And now you can just start to, if your eyes are closed, you can open them up and you can start to wiggle your toes, your feet. And if you need to, just kind of stretch your hands above your head and come back to this space, ready to learn about health and balance. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Randy. That I definitely needed that this morning. So to kick us off, it has been 1 year since states have been shut down, and it's been a long year. So how have you been able to reflect and make space to recognize this anniversary? And this is for both Randy and Kenna. Feel free to answer.
I'll let you start, Kenna.
Oh, okay. It is odd trying not to interrupt each other on Zoom. So I think the most important thing is, with that mindful awareness, to take the time to do the reflection. So when we just keep kind of moving on to the next thing, we miss these milestones and these anniversaries for reflection. So I think, whatever folks are doing, if you're doing something, thinking about where was I at this time last year, what was happening in my community or with my family or friends, I think that's really useful. And I think in reflecting, one of the things I've noticed is that, the beginning of the pandemic for me was very sudden. It was like, okay, all of a sudden you need to go home from work, and my kids were coming home and we didn't know when we were going back. But in reflection, I remember that time of kind of transition and shock and grief, because I was aware of all of the suffering happening in the world, even though in my little circle seemed like nothing was happening. But I also think in reflection, there were some unhealthy patterns in my life leading up to that stop. And so reflecting on that now, I think about when we have enough folks vaccinated that we're returning to something more normal, what kinds of things do I want to continue from this way of living, and what things am I actually finding I want to get back to because they're fulfilling to me?
Yeah, I mean, I think this year has really forced me to reflect on many different things. First and foremost, myself, just really taking time to kind of look within. One of the things that I made a commitment to was that my goal was to become a better person over this next year, coming out of this pandemic, a better person, really doing some of this inner work. But I think one of the things that in regards to reflection is it's really, we can get caught into kind of only looking at the negative components of what was taking place. And I think part of it was, that's important. We need to be able to kind of recognize what we're going through. We need to be able to recognize, the range of different emotions. And I did. I spent some time really, being with those. But I think what it really also forced me to do is, regardless how difficult days are, regardless of how difficult this past year has been, there's also a lot of beauty and a lot of wonderful things that have taken place over this year, and really has forced me to reflect on that and be very deliberate to look for those things throughout each and every day. Some of the beauty of each and every day. Some of, even though these are challenges, right? Some of the learnings that have come along, right? How to slow things down, how to kind of spend more time connecting with family members. I mean, it was me and my son, right? We had to, we connected at a deeper level than ever before, maybe at times too much for his liking, but this was the reality, right? Is that we were put in these situations. So I think part of it is learning along the way. So I really took it upon myself to each and every day is to reflect on that, right? To go in deeper. What is it that I can take away? What can I learn? And also just being able to be self-compassionate myself, being able to reflect, that this is really difficult. Right? This is a real difficult time. And just being able to be self-compassionate to myself and really normalizing that, right? Is that we're all going through this together.
Ooh, yeah. Kenny and Randy, Kenna and Randy, that I think you're speaking to so much, right? So we have been sort of forced to face so many obstacles and challenges and go through such a wide range of emotions during our time during this lockdown. But also, Randy, you're really speaking to that building resilience, right? Of recognizing the beauty of what we faced and the connections that we might have been making during our shutdown. So could you expand on what you started mentioning, some practices, right? Some reflection, some times of peace and recognizing what you are grateful for. But what other coping mechanisms have you implemented and used in your life that we can take with us while we're hopefully transitioning back to in-person interactions?
So I think, part of the opportunity here is that a lot of the things we were doing pre-pandemic, it was, we believed that we were doing them because we had to. And we didn't really question that reality or question those rules very often. And then all of a sudden, everything changed, many things changed, and things we took as a rule or a requirement just didn't exist anymore. And so I think that opens up some space right? To think about, what am I doing now because I think I have to, but maybe I don't have to. And what did I stop doing that maybe I don't want to pick back up again? So for me, it's a lot about just thinking about those things that I assumed or took for granted as true or real that maybe aren't. And like a really kind of, I guess, a practical example of that is if I would get a notification about like an opportunity for an activity for my children, and I thought they might enjoy it or might benefit from it, I felt like I should sign them up, right? And so I think when all of those things stopped being available, right, then it was realizing, oh, there's some good that comes from just doing fewer things, right? And so now when I get those invitations or opportunities, it's like weighing that, the good of it, against kind of the amount of stress or the amount of kind of overactivity that might lead to for our whole family. Or, you know, professionally, I get things about, you know, here's a training opportunity, here's a training. It's like, oh, I should do that if I can fit it in, I should. And I think the pandemic offered me kind of a different perspective of when I don't do those things, there's good that comes from that too.
Yeah, no, I think Kenna, you're right on. Is this has taught us what works and perhaps what doesn't work in our lives. And I think for me, one of the things it is really has done is really reinforced and confirmed to me that these areas that I talk about and that I've implemented in my life really do work, right? I know that the science shows that I've implemented this, but this was really the true test for me. Right? Does mindfulness on a daily basis, how is that going to help? Well, this was adversity at its finest. You know, how important is, you know, exercise, eating healthy, getting proper sleep, connecting with people, right? This was the true test for me. And it was kind of like I was training for something that I didn't know that I was going to have to really implement more than ever. And I think one of the things that I'm very proud to say is I've done a very good job of really testing these out for myself, you know, making sure that I am practicing mindfulness on a consistent basis, making sure that I'm practicing gratitude of what are some good things that have happened in my day on a daily basis, making sure that I'm connecting with people as much as possible, maybe not in person, or I mean, we haven't been able to do that, but it's really forced me to connect with people and reconnect some old relationships that you know, without this I may have never connected with. You know, I've been able to meet some people on campus due to certain events, and I've really grown a relationship that I'm just so grateful for, that I may have never had the opportunity to do that. So really giving myself the permission to really take the time to do these things, you know, to get, making sure that I am getting my 8 hours of sleep the majority of the time, not all the time, trying to eat as healthy as I can, right? Knowing that these were the things that were going to help me, you know, be able to cope and come out as strong as I can each and every day. So I think for me that this is what this has really done is allowed me. I think the other thing it has forced me to do, which is challenging for me at times, is to slow down. Is we get caught into this rat race of working, and you know, with my son, you know, being involved in athletics as much as he is, that was shut down, right? So that was not something that I was used to, of having this time, and how am I gonna fill that? And was able to do some of these things that again, for my self-care, for my family, that I've found to be very beneficial. Now the challenge is staying with those when we start to kind of get back to the way things used to be at some level.
So kind of expanding upon the things you mentioned with really self-reflecting and testing out what this pandemic has forced us to see within ourselves. How do you stay motivated? Because pandemic fatigue is real. I am in my last semester as a senior here in college. The whole year has been within this pandemic, doing virtual learning. How do you stay motivated to keep up with those goals, to make sure that we're coming out of this year better than when we came into it?
So I think there are a couple of things that help with motivation. And one is kind of really reflecting on, why am I doing this? Like, what matters to me about this? And in that reflection, you might find that you lose motivation for some things, but that's not because you should keep doing them, right? It's because those things don't actually matter or are not meaningful to you. And so I maybe lost motivation to do things that I was just doing out of a sense of obligation and not really because they mattered to me. On the other hand, when I think about something like, putting on my mask and washing my hands, it's like I am still very motivated to do that, because if I reflect on why am I doing this, I'm doing this to protect my community, really, right? I'm unlikely to become very sick if I got COVID, although you never know for sure, but I am very motivated to protect people who are higher risk, and particularly people who can't get vaccinated. It's like, I will do whatever I can to keep them safe. And I find that very motivating. So if you kind of think about, why am I doing this, right? Like, why am I taking this class? Well, because I want to learn about this. This is really important to me. If you're taking the class because, your roommate told you to, maybe you do lose motivation at that point because it wasn't ever very meaningful to begin with. But I'm finding that I have more motivation for the things that I find meaningful, which seems appropriate.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Is the meaning and purpose and the why, right? Why are you doing this? Is obviously going to increase motivation. And I think with goals, this is the thing, is we talk about goals a lot, how important they are. And yeah, I do believe that they're vital. And the research shows that people that do set goals are more likely to accomplish those. But I think with goals is one of the things at times is there is theory and a way of doing it. And I think one of the things with goals is they need to be somewhat realistic. You want to stretch them a bit, right? Where they're challenging and they're not bored, but we have to make sure that they're realistic and they're attainable. Because if they're not attainable or they're unrealistic, what happens is it leads to frustration and a decrease in motivation. And that's definitely not what we want. We want to continue to make sure that we're getting up. We know that we're striving. And when we see that and we feel that, obviously that increases our motivation to continue. I think the other thing with motivation is really at times controlling what you can control. I think a lot of times we waste a lot of our energy on motivation trying to control things that we have no control over, which is easier said than done. So I always say is how do you really focus on controlling what you can control? The first thing is yourself, right? Is really looking at that. The other area that it was funny. I was talking to my colleague this morning about the term willpower, and one of the things that we know is that we each of us has a certain capacity of willpower, and we know that as time goes on, it decreases. So if we are looking at, if there's something that we do want to accomplish, what the research is showing is to do that early on in the day when we have the most willpower to kind of stay with it. If we wait till later in the evening, and I'm aware of this too, right? If I say, well, I'm going to work out later this evening, it decreases, and there's less chance that I'm going to do it than when I first wake up in the morning and my willpower capacity is high. So those are some things that I look at anyway.
That made me think of a couple things I wanted to add to that, Randy, which is that often if it's a goal that you've tried in the past and you have not been successful, it's very often that people get into like this blaming, shaming cycle where it's like, oh, I didn't do it, and they feel really awful about themselves, and they think the solution is to feel even more awful about themselves, and so then they'll really stick to it the next time. And that does not work. So if you have tried in the past and you were not successful, your focus really needs to be on what didn't work about the way I set up this plan, and what kind of plan, what kind of structure would help me to be more successful. Because if you focus on it being about some kind of like personality problem in you, that doesn't really motivate change in the long run. And that's related also to the idea of like goals. This is going to sound a little sappy for some of you maybe, but goals that come from a place of love for the self are going to be more enduring than goals that come from a place of hate for the self. So if you are going to get exercise because you love yourself and you want to take care of yourself and you know that it's going to, help you feel good, you're going to be much more likely to stick with that plan than if you wake up every morning and say, I have to do this because if I don't, I'm a terrible, bad, disgusting person. That's not going to last. And it's not because you're a terrible, bad, disgusting person. It's because the frame is really punishing and not affirming.
Ooh, that is some powerful stuff, Kenna and Randy. Thank you so much for making this, I feel like, so much more relatable, like attainable for us, right? I think that especially when we're in this point of the semester too, where we have so much going on and so much happening, that setting attainable goals and also not it being in this blame, shame tap for ourselves. I think that's so powerful. And on that same line, I feel, and Kenna, you mentioned this earlier, that we've been faced to feel really big emotions, right? So grief, shame, blame, loneliness, potentially, lots of big emotions. And I feel like we're probably all still feeling those big emotions. How do we make space recognizing these emotions? What does that look like in your practices? How can we manage this?
Okay, Kenna, you're going to leave that one to me, huh?
Yeah, I saw you unmuted, so.
Well, no, I think this is the thing when we talk about emotions is this, I believe that all emotions, right? All our emotions are important and valuable. We all experience those, right? The positive emotions, yet difficult emotions. And I think part of it is just, that's part of being human, is that we experience the range of the different emotions. And there's a few little techniques or interventions that I think are very helpful in regards to this. Tara Brock, who's, she's one of the leading meditative, mindfulness teachers. She uses what she calls RAIN, and RAIN is really stands for being able to recognize what we're experiencing, being aware of it, investigating where that is and coming from, or why it may be experiencing. And then lastly, about just nurturing yourself, right? Being all right with it, being accepting for whatever it is that you're really experiencing. So I love that. It's a simple way of being aware of that. I think too many times, especially difficult emotions, we as humans, the first time we start to experience those difficult emotions, it's very easy for us to avoid or suppress. And that's very, it's very effective for periods of time, but we know that those emotions will come out in some other way. right? We can only avoid and suppress for a certain period of time. So having the ability to kind of be able to recognize that and process that and to work through that in a healthy way, I think is vital, right? The other intervention is very similar, and that's by Mark Brackett, and his is ruler, right? Is to recognize, understand, right? The other thing that he says is label. And I think labels are a really important part when it comes to emotions, right? Is because we as humans, I think one of the things that I'm finding is that we don't have the emotional literacy. We don't have the emotional vocabulary a lot of time to be able to really be able to label what we're feeling. And the saying that many people in psychology say is at times we need to be able to name it, to tame it. And being able to name it then allows us to distinguish between two different things, right? Are we angry? Are we frustrated, right? They're two different things, which require two different ways of responding. So his is recognize, understand, label, express, right? Being able to express it. And then the last thing is being able to regulate, right? Really being able to manage that, right? Regardless of what the emotion is. Is it positive? We want to be able to savor that, express that, but also be able to regulate it. And if it's a difficult emotion, the same thing, right? But we as humans have to be open and receptive to the range of different emotions, from positive to difficult.
Yeah, so I don't have any cool acronyms, but I would just generally say that if kind of your frame is that you're here alive to do things, then emotions become sometimes a barrier to that. So you just want them to go away, stop interfering with all the things that you're doing, getting in your way. But if your frame is that you are here to be and to live, then emotions really add to that experience. They're not something to be pushed away or ignored. They're something to recognize and welcome with a lot of curiosity and interest. And I think emotions are your friend, but you maybe haven't been a friend to them if you have been rejecting them and telling them to go away all the time. And so they might be maybe not the most kind, compassionate guests when you do start to allow them to come if you've been rejecting them for a very long time. But that won't be forever. And I think my favorite image of emotions is that when you notice them arising, and they often come in like a wave, right? Is to welcome them in, to have some tea with you, right? Like instead of slamming the door, it's like, come on in, let's sit down, let's have some tea. And they can tell you a lot about yourself and your relationships and the world.
Yeah, I love that, Ken. Another thing that I always say is, yeah, you put the welcome mat out to all emotions, right? Just welcome them. And I love what you said about just being open and curious. And I think that's really important when we talk about emotions is that willingness. The other thing is I always, when, as a background and clinician, I cannot tell you how many times I ask the classic counseling question, right? How does that make you feel? And I can tell you, many people look at me like I'm an alien from outer space. Well, what do you mean, right? I don't. So part of it is working on that. And a lot of times I would bring out a feelings list of so people start to get to understand what it is that they're feeling. Not only that, but the next question, and I always ask myself, where do I feel that in my body? Right? Where do I feel that in my body? So it's also starting to become knowledgeable and aware of these things. The other thing with emotions too is also looking at what may have triggered that emotion. Right? Being again aware of that. What was it? A thought? Was it an experience? Was it a feel? So again, really just being open and curious about emotions. Emotions are messengers, right? They're and I always say this, they start as whispers, but if you don't listen to them, they start to come back and speak a little louder. And at times, if you continue to avoid, they start to scream, right? So I always say is listen, be open, be receptive.
Yes, I love that, Randy. One of my last therapists said, bring the emotion in, hold it, recognize it, and then release it, right? Like it's always coming and going, and it's managing and recognizing. And I love that thought of recognizing, taking inventory within your body too. That's amazing. So I want to shift gears here from this individual to as a collective on a community level. How can we support one another's health and balance? I know many friends and colleagues that have been really struggling and pushed to the limit through this time. How can we support one another through this?
So one thing I would say, with the pandemic, has exposed a lot of injustice in our world. And so when I think about, folks who are really struggling during this time, what I think about is how that's exposing a lot of unfairness and injustice in our systems, that some people are doing a-okay and some people are really struggling and having a very hard time. And so I think acknowledging that difficulty that people are experiencing belongs to all of us, that we're all responsible for that. And we're all responsible for changing whatever systems and inequities led to that individual experience of distress. So that might be a little bit like abstract, but when a person is saying like, I can't pay my bills, I lost my job, right? And they're very distressed and, they're worried they're going to lose their housing. I don't think it's kind or true to address it as just like, okay, well, you just need to, I don't know, maybe sleep more and do some more meditation, right? It's like we all share responsibility for creating a world where that can happen to people. And so we all share responsibility for changing the policies that have led to that kind of outcome.
Yeah, no, I think those are incredible points, Kenna. I think one of the things that as a community is I'll just kind of use the UWS community is coming together and doing, just even at times holding space for one another, of knowing that we're all kind of in this together, not that it's equal. I mean, I always say is that we're in similar waters but in different boats, kind of navigating through this. But I think part of it is just holding that space, helping, normalizing, that this is difficult, being able to be there for one another. I think that's the big thing that this has taught me is it's all right to ask for help, right? Or to reach out to people when I need it, or being able to reach out to other people at times when I feel or I sense they need it. But I think that's been some of the biggest thing for me is just being able to come together in community to have meaningful, deep conversations about what we're experiencing, having, it somewhat normalized and to be validated on some of the things that I'm experiencing, I think is really, really important. I think with connections, this is the thing is that, again, research shows it's the number one thing that increases someone's well-being more than anything. That's what research has shown. And when we look at relationships, it's not about, the quantity of them. It's about the quality of our relationships. And I think that's really something that's really important, is making sure that we really have and we're utilizing those quality relationships as much as we can, especially during difficult times. And we as humans have a tendency to, when things become difficult, we at times have the tendencies to push away or to isolate. And that's really the time that we need to invest in our relationships and actually move towards and ask for what we need. So I think that as a community, it's about coming together and to really be there for one another in whichever way that person needs at that moment in time.
Yeah, I think that speaks a lot to, that fear of alienation, reaching out rather than just kind of closing in on yourself. Um, but for the sake of time here, we have about just over 15 minutes left. The last kind of topic subcategory that I think we wanted to discuss is, so we're starting to transition, like, slowly but surely out of this pandemic, with the vaccines, going back to in-person interactions, but it's still very uncertain. So I guess the question I'd like to ask is, how can we respond to that uncertainty? Because obviously we want to get out, we want to go back to what we feel comfortable with, but what even is comfortable anymore? Because we've been so virtual and distant from for so long. So I guess how do we deal with that uncertainty of not knowing when things will change, not knowing if things will remain the same?
Okay, so part of what I'm hearing your question, Amber, is part uncertainty and part anxiety, and they overlap. Folks who struggle with anxiety, they tend to find things that are uncertain more upsetting than things that are even directly threatening. So if I said to someone with anxiety, there might be salmonella on your kitchen counter, they're going to find that more upsetting than if I said there is salmonella on your kitchen counter. So it's good to know, like, the interaction between those two and to notice, like, is there a threat here? Or am I responding to the uncertainty as if it's a threat? So with anxiety, I would say your comfort is not a good indicator of what you should and should not do. So with anxiety, you really need to kind of think about, what do I value? What matters to me? What's important to me? And align your actions with your values, not with your comfort. Because if you align your actions with your comfort, your world will shrink and shrink and shrink and shrink, and you'll be less and less and less comfortable with many, many things. For folks who aren't having a hard time with anxiety, but are just, dealing with the uncertainty that has become very apparent, maybe revealed that it was always uncertain. We just deluded ourselves into thinking that there was certainty where there wasn't. I like there's an analogy of, how do you respond to waves if you're standing on the beach, right? And every time a wave comes, do you try to, like, stop it, put your hands up or your feet, or try to block it from coming? Or do you just lay down and ride the wave? And so I think there's a lot of, like, with uncertainty, a lot of just accepting, this is uncertain. I don't know because this is something that cannot be known. And so I will accept and respond in each moment as I need to in the moment. And if you're able to, center and stay present with yourself, you can really trust that you'll know what to do in each of those moments when they come.
Yeah, Kenna just did an outstanding job of kind of answering, and I'd answered very similar. I mean, I think part of it is that we know that with change comes uncertainty. And part of that is there is going to be a certain amount of anxiety that we feel. And I think part of it is just normalizing that, right? Yeah, this is difficult, right? So there is that acceptance. The more that we fight it, the more that we feel that it's wrong, that we feel a certain way, the more difficult it becomes, right? We kind of feed that. So I think at times it's just, yeah, this is, we're going through a transition. This is different. There is going to be a certain amount of anxiety. And part of it too is anxiety isn't always a bad thing, right? At times experiencing some form of it or some level of it really helps with motivation. It allows us to get things done or to move forward or to make the change in a way that's going to be beneficial. I think where it starts to become problematic is when it's too high, and it really keeps us locked or kind of paralyzed or the inability to kind of move. So I think that's one of the ways that I look at it. I think the other is again, that acceptance of there are going to be things that we're just going to have to accept, that we're going through this. And again, the more that we try to gain control at times with some of these things, actually the more that we tend to lose control, right? So it's very paradoxical. A story that I like to kind of give is my son, when he was very young, he was very curious, and we used to always go into the toy stores together, and he would pick up toys. He just could not resist the urge to do so. And one day he picked up one of the Chinese finger traps. I'm sure you're all familiar with that. And he just couldn't help himself, and he put his fingers in it. And I could tell that once he went to kind of get out of that, right, you could see the panic in his mind, right? Because it's the natural response is when I feel this way is to pull that way. And he turned around, and I could see the fear in his eyes. And I just said to him, Nolan, take a deep breath and just, and he did. And when he did that, he naturally went in. It was the opposite, and it kind of released. Right? So I think that's at times we need to just be able to let go. And like Kenna said, is to ride the waves, right? Just to kind of accept it and to ride it out instead of trying to fight it. And again, at times trying to gain control, we lose control. And the other thing is there are things that we can control, right? In focusing our energy on that. And I always say is letting go, like we've mentioned, to things that you don't have control over, right? And being able to distinguish between the two.
I was just going to add to that, Randy, those times, if you can, reframe them and notice that you have an opportunity now to practice flexibility, can help, instead of seeing it as a bad thing that's happening to you. It's like, this is a challenging thing that is presenting me with an opportunity to improve my skills in flexibility.
Yeah, opportunity to learn too more about yourself and how you can go through experiences like this. Absolutely. I love that. I'm gonna pause because we have around 10 minutes left. Participants, please feel free to use the chat feature if you have questions for Randy, Kenna. So far, we've got a couple of comments going through. I think this is great. Good. As we wait, Randy and Kenna, are there any last tidbits of knowledge that you hope to share with everyone while we've got this space?
Well, if you're going to give me an opportunity, I'm going to promote some of the things that we do within the Pruitt Center. I mean, this is really one of the reasons why the Pruitt Center is, from my perspective, so important to have on a college campus, is specifically for these difficult times of really being able to learn and to utilize some of these teachable, learnable skills of mindfulness and well-being. So I really think that, again, this is the thing is with these teachable, learnable skills, they do require you to take time. They also require practice. And I think this is the difficult thing for people is actually giving themselves the permission to do that. So just be aware, we have wonderful offerings. We offer yoga twice a week. We offer Tai Chi. We offer opportunities to practice mindfulness in community. So you not only get to practice and learn the skill of mindfulness, but also connecting and building community. So I think those are some of the opportunities. I know that Lori teaches the MBSR class. So again, there's these opportunities on our campus that are available that don't require, there's no fees for them, to really give yourself the permission to engage in some of these. And we know that once you start to do it, you'll get the benefits. This is with a lot of these is it takes some time for you to start to recognize the benefit, to form those habits. But once we start to experience that, they're self-reinforcing. right? If exercise is really difficult for a few weeks until you start to get the benefits. And then it's like, well, why would I ever not do something that makes me feel so darn good? So again, I would encourage all of you to kind of, engage, come to some of our events, learn some of these areas and continue to come together in community.
So I wonder if any of the folks who came today maybe want to share what made them come, what drew you here, and if there's anything you wanted to ask or anything you wanted to share.
They received a lot of emails from Amber and I. That's bet.
This is the other thing is just to know that there's many people on our campus that are knowledgeable in some of these areas, right? There is. I mean, just know that at any time, again, this is about community, is that we're here for one another. So if you're curious or you're open or you have questions about any of any of these topics that we talked about or other topics, you may be opening up a magazine and seeing some of this. I always love to, okay, let's learn more about this. Or is there someone on campus that I could reach out that may be knowledgeable in this area to learn more about, right? This is the wonderful thing about working on a college campus. And I would say is that we have experts in all different areas around us accessible. Okay, so I always say is use them, right? Use the individuals on our campus to learn about things that maybe, you may be interested in. Or, the other thing is I always say at times with some of these things too, it's nice to do with another person, kind of the buddy system, or that you're able to engage in this, and that along with that comes some accountability that you can kind of check in with one another. Me and my colleague did a 30-day mindfulness gratitude challenge, right? We did that together, right? At times we just check in, or, the text would just be a check mark, knowing that, we did it. We kept each other accountable to kind of start to build the momentum, the motivation, and the habit.
So it looks like we've had a couple people just jump off because, 1 o'clock meetings can pop up on you real quick. So I totally understand that. So I think with that, I feel comfortable with wrapping this up today. Randy, Kenna, thank you so much for being here with us today. I definitely learned a lot that I will take with me throughout the rest of this year and into my future years. Again, thank you also those who are still here. We do have some upcoming Tuesday timely topics in April, and then also next week with Lieutenant Governor Barnes. Emily, if you want to say some closing remarks here too.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much, Randy and Kenna. We really appreciate all of your knowledge and expertise and time. Yes, I dropped in the chat feature some of our links to register for those upcoming events. Next week, Tuesday, is Lieutenant Governor Barnes. So we really hope that you all can join us for that, and then other Tuesday timely topics in April. So please join us. But thank you all so much for your time, and we hope to see you next time.